There it goes. And we are live. Hello, everybody. This is Haley Lynn Gray with Leadership Girl, and I am a business coach, a sales and marketing strategist, and my focus is on helping you grow your business. And in this group, we talk a lot about things that affect women, entrepreneurs, and our lives and balance and all of those good things. And tonight, I have a dear friend of mine and guest, and this is Elizabeth Stevenson, and she is a family law attorney. And we also have Allie the dog, who is hanging over here behind me as we are babysitting her. We have a loner dog for the weekend. My kids said they wanted a dog.
I love dogs.
Hi there, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm so glad to be here tonight. Thank you for letting me share this opportunity to talk about family law and how we can help women and entrepreneurs sort of navigate the personal issues that they come up against every day.
Yeah, this is such an important set of topics because I think people forget, and they don't understand at all, like family law. And one of my missions is to help provide empowerment and education and resources so that you can understand your rights, because so many marriages end up in divorce, and a lot of those are entrepreneurs who end up in divorce. And sometimes it's not really what you think in terms of ownership. So explain to me, what happens to a business if you end up getting a separation and a divorce, at least in North Carolina?
Well, in North Carolina, it's sort of cut and dried. You have a marital estate, which is whatever was earned during the marriage is marital property. So let's say you've worked really hard for 10 years, build your business, and it's going great. Well, your husband or your wife, whoever the going to be ex-spouse is at the first step entitled to half of that. So all of your work and all of your, blood, sweat, and tears, we look at in North Carolina as that was working as a unit. So when you separate, it's your business, but the other partner is entitled to half of it. It's like if you earned your 401k, the other person's entitled to half of that. So it's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people, but that's just the way it is here.
Right. And that could be like a big surprise because it's in my name. I did the work. I earned it. What do you mean?
What do you mean I don't get 100% of that? What's up with that? So, and a lot of times for entrepreneurs and folks who have a solo practice or a business, it's really based on your name and what you can bring to it. So what is it really worth? It's a question. And if you weren't there, like you, Haley, if you weren't doing Leadership Girl, what would it be worth? Probably nothing. So,
at this point, right.
Well, no, but
No, I agree. Yeah. No, I'm working on creating assets that are sellable, etc. But yeah, certainly I am, in relatively early stages in my business. So yeah, it wouldn't have a lot of assets I can sell.
Even a closely held business, the value of it is the person who's running the business.
Exactly. It's not really sellable or willable.
Right. So it comes down a lot of times to, unless you have a lot of product or you have a lot of income coming in, there's not a lot of money attachment you can put to that. So a lot of times you can walk away with your business without having to pay the other partner a lot in that respect. But it can get expensive to get it valued and do that sort of thing. So those are issues that you need to think about. And, if you're just thinking about getting married, there are things called prenuptial agreements where if it's my business and what I earn from it, if something happens, I get to keep that. And married partners can contract too to say, if it's my business and I earn it, this is what I keep mine and you keep yours. And there's nothing wrong with that. You're not saying we're going to divorce or separate. You're just protecting what you built for yourself and for your legacy. And so those aren't bad things to think about, prenuptials and marital agreements.
Right. No, and I think, I've heard it plenty of times, good contracts make good business.
Right.
And this is just a contract that is very much about your business.
Right. And it's something that you have put your blood, sweat, and tears into. And so you want to protect it. You want to provide for your family, but in the event something would happen, you want to protect yourself and your children too. And so that's what it's it's just a protection mechanism for folks to make sure that you get to keep what you work so hard for, in a way.
No, and I mean, I think that people need to really understand, kind of what some of the rules are, because they're not, I mean, I would have never thought that, personally, that, if you are married and you have a company and you built it from the ground up and your spouse was never involved, never worked a day in it, ever,
right,
that he is then, or she is then entitled to half it, because right. It is a marital property. And like, whoa, I would have never, thought that myself, had I not, had, interactions with attorneys and, learned, some of these great, true or false facts from you guys at like BNI meetings. And I'm like, wow, that's really kind of interesting. And
so, right. And so you just want to protect yourself, and so if you're just starting out your business, you want to think about the contract with your partners and your distributors and that sort of thing, but you need to think about your partnership with your partner. And how that's going to work, and how to, how best to support your family, but also protect yourself.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I mean, I think that is so important.
And I think a lot of times as women, we don't think that way. We're very much about giving and making sure everyone else is okay. And it's hard when I talk to women
right
around these issues, it's hard to get them to wrap their heads around, well, I'm being selfish, or I shouldn't do this. But no, you're not. You're just as important as anyone else in the family. And if something would happen, you want to make sure you're okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right. No, and it makes perfect sense. And, there's a lot of like issues legally around having a business that people really don't think about. They don't think about what happens when I die or what happens when I get divorced.
Right.
But those are big deals, and they can really make a big difference to, your family and your family's legacy, on whether you think about it and put the proper paperwork in place or not.
Right. And it's not you're doing anything wrong. You're just, and that's a good point you make. It's not about protecting you, but it's like if you separate and divorce and you have children, both of you are responsible for these children and to raise them. And so you want to make sure that you have the resources and the wherewithal to make sure that when they're with you, that they have the same lifestyle as best you can to take care of them. And there's absolutely nothing selfish or wrong in thinking that way.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I agree. And, it's kind of just one of those things, finding a good attorney, talking to a good attorney, and understanding what your rights are and are not is so important.
Right. A lot of people come to me after they've made decisions, and I can't undo those decisions. I can't go back and make it right. So I would much rather someone come and sit with me, because in my practice, they're not cases, they're people. And so I want to hear their story, and I want to hear everything about you. And then we can sit down and plan and do a roadmap and figure out how to best protect you, your family, and how you can move forward. And there's not a thing wrong with doing that.
No. And I mean, so often I think people make decisions and they fly off the handle, and oh my gosh, the consequences can be devastating.
Yes, absolutely.
Up to and ending up homeless.
Well, we want to try to avoid that. And unfortunately, if you're an entrepreneur, a lot of entrepreneurs, may have been stay-at-home moms, and so they're starting their own business, and so they're dependent on someone. Mm-hmm. So what happens, and what do I do? And those are big questions that you sort of need to think about as you start your business and work toward the future in the event something may happen.
Absolutely. And it's so important that people think before they act, and on a lot of levels, right?
Yes, I have my rule is the 24-hour rule. Whatever decision you want to make, if it's a big decision, sit back, reflect, talk, get all the information that you can, and then make a wise and thoughtful decision instead of just sort of jumping out there and doing something that may have a lifelong consequence for you.
And one of the women commented, regulations are always changing too.
Right. That's true.
The laws are always changing. Yes. And they vary very much from state to state and country to country.
Right. So I can't speak to business law. That's not my thing, but I can speak to family law. It's all I've ever done. And, you know, in North Carolina, it's the starting point is 50-50. And for the most part, that's how it's going to be.
Right.
Unless you have a prenup or some other contract that changes that dynamic.
Right. And my understanding is that it's pretty much 50-50 on everything.
It is. Unless you can prove that someone is going out and charging things or, you know, that aren't for a marital purpose, it's really hard to move off that 50%, you know,
right.
because that's just the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
But remember, you know, 25, 30 years ago, there was no equitable, we call it equitable distribution. We were property. Mm-hmm. We had nothing. So getting our 50% is really a big deal. And as it is today, it may seem unfair, but at least we've got half of it.
So Delaney says, what is tonight's topic? And hello to you and hello to my guest as well. So we're talking to attorney Elizabeth Stevenson. New Direction Family Law.
Nice.
And here is the link to New Direction Family Law. And we're talking about, owning a business and, some of the rules that, affect owning a business and family law and divorce and separation and those kinds of things. And, a lot of the things that people should consider if they are contemplating, a separation or divorce. And, know that some of these things are very much state specific.
Right.
And Elizabeth is here as an attorney here in Raleigh, North Carolina. And we know each other through networking meetings. So, everybody thinks that I do all of my networking online, I think.
No, she really is in person. She's here.
I really am a real person, and people see a lot of me. Yes. And yeah, it's kind of fun. And Mama Bird says, hello to my son. So hello, Miss Liz, and hello to my son. Yeah, so kind of back over it, because we've had some people pop on, over the time that we've been here. So we were talking tonight about, some of the things that you need to consider if you're an entrepreneur and you own a business. What does that mean, if you're thinking about getting separated or a divorce? I mean, what does the distribution look like?
Well, just to review, it looks like 50-50. That's the starting point. I'm an entrepreneur. I own my own law firm, and I've done it for 17 years. And my husband and I had a prenup, and there was nothing wrong with that. He worked for his law firm and worked really hard for that, and I worked really hard for mine. And it doesn't have to be contentious. It's just sort of, you got to value yourself and understand what it is and what your worth is. And you can still contribute to your family, but still protect yourself. And that's the way we feel about it, that prenups and marital contracts are just, smart common sense when you own a business.
Yeah. So explain to me, I've heard of a prenup, but you've mentioned a marital contract a couple of times. So what exactly is a marital contract?
It's sort of the same thing. Marital folks can contract about their property. You can't contract about child custody and those sorts of things. But if let's say y'all been married for a while and you decide to start your own business, y'all can agree and work up a contract and sign it and say, this is mine. Or if something would happen, I get 90%, you get 10%, or however y'all want to work it. But they're grown adults. They live together. You can contract out your business and your property.
Okay. And so at what point would you recommend that somebody put together a marital contract?
I think if you're considering or have a business, I think it's important and prudent to just go talk to an attorney and say, here's what I'm thinking about. Here's what I believe. When I do my business plan, in 3 years, I'm going to be in 6-7 figures. Let's talk about that and see how we can protect you in the event something would happen, but still make it so while you're together, and hopefully you always will be, you can contribute and it can benefit your family. But in the event something would happen, you want to protect yourself and your children too.
Right. And, I think that that's kind of an important thing. Mm-hmm. And so what things can you cover in a marital agreement? What things can you not cover in a marital agreement?
You can't cover things like anything that have to do with your children, because the courts look at what's in the best interest of your children, and things go awry sometimes when you're separating and divorcing. So you can't put things in there about what we're going to do for custody in the event we separate, or what child support's going to be, or that sort of thing. But you can talk about your 401ks, about your retirement, about your investments, about your business, any kind of property, certainly appropriate things that you can talk about and discuss in a marital agreement.
Okay. Yeah. And is that the same thing for a prenuptial agreement?
Yeah, they're just two different things. One is you're not married yet. The other one is you're married, but it's the same sort of contract and the same sort of things that you can talk about.
Do you want me to hold her? Yeah, no, and I think that's, kind of important to, think about, just like all the different contingency plans.
Right, and especially if you're sort of older and it's a second marriage for you, and perhaps your children are grown.
The wet cat.
You want to make sure that your children are taken care of, and you are too. And so those are just sort of logical, thoughtful things that, sit down and talk with an attorney, whether it's me or somebody else. You may not want to do it, or you may, but at least know your options and be educated about it.
Right. No, and that might make sense. It's just like you're not, obviously we don't have a choice about whether to die or not, but, it's not that you're planning to die if you are putting together a will.
Exactly.
So I would think that this is kind of the same thing.
It is. Just because you do a prenup, you're not anticipating that you're going to divorce. But in the event you do, you've been thoughtful about it, and each of you are protected, and you're going to be okay. And the other issue is you don't spend years and years and years litigating tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands of dollars later. I mean, I've been in court for the last 3 days in a case that's been going on since 2010. And if they had thought about this and come and talk to someone and put these things in place, those things could have been avoided, or at least mitigated in some way. So
right,
it's hard to look toward the future in that way, but things happen. And so get all your options, get educated. That's all we ask.
Absolutely. So, this sounds like ungodly expensive if you're talking about a case that's been going around since forever. It can get ungodly expensive in a case that started yesterday, and so this is what I tell people who come to me and my clients is I would much rather see that money stay in your pocket or go to your children's college fund than pay me to stay in court for 3 days. And if you stay in court for 3 days and talk badly about the other parent, and they talk badly about you, it's really, really hard to co-parent and exist through your children's graduations, their marriages, your grandchildren, your holidays. It's just, I really, truly believe in thinking forward, and contracts in marriage and prenups can help you avoid all of that pain and all of that heartache and all of that financial stress. Jazz makes a comment that it just reminds her of insurance.
Well, that's a very good point. Exactly that. Spend a little up front and save not only your money, but your heartache, your emotions, your children, so that y'all aren't fighting all the time, but you can move forward and take care of you and your children.
Right. She says she thinks in terms of house agreements, it's just so important. And I agree. I mean, I agree that it is incredibly important. All of this is just incredibly important. So say somebody, wants to avoid court. What are their options for avoiding court?
Well, their options are they can come to an agreement, in a separation agreement, which is just a contract. But again, you have to agree. So you may want certain things, and the other party may want certain things. And if you can't agree, then nobody can force the other party to sign the contract. You can go to mediation, which is an impartial third party, where you sit down either all together or in separate rooms with your attorneys and try to work something out. Or you can arbitrate, which is you hire a private judge, a family law attorney or mediator, and they can make the same decisions that a judge can make. So those are your three options before you go to court.
So how often do people manage to use and work things out with either a mediator or an arbitrator?
A lot. I mean, I would say 90% of the time, if you can get people to together in a way, even in separate rooms, you can get them to settle, because there are three things that people think about. What's important to them: reputation, my time, or my money. So we can either settle this today, or we can go to court and you can spend another $20,000, and that's a great incentive to settle. A lot of people come to me and say, my reputation or how my kids feel about me is the most important thing to me. So they give up some things that the judge would give them just to settle and move forward. And then the other part is time. You start litigating, it's a full-time job. And it's a year of your time. And it's not just time, it's emotion, it's heartbreak, it's stress, and it's time that you can't spend moving forward in your own life, and it's time you don't spend with your kids. And so those are great incentives to settle.
Right. And you just made a good point. It's a year of your own time. So if you are trying to take, if you're trying to go to court because you can't work through a mediator and you decide that you just can't do it, how long does it take to get a court hearing?
Right. We have a family court system in Wake County, which is you're assigned a judge for the life of your case. So if I filed a complaint for you today for, let's say, custody and child support and spousal support, it would probably be about 6 weeks before I could get you in front of a judge. And then you're going to be sitting in there on that day that's your trial date, and there are going to be 20 people in front of you. And the judge is going to politely say, I am so sorry, I cannot hear your case today. You will have to set another date. And that will be another 3 months out. And so that takes, and especially if you're an entrepreneur, you're not answering the phone, you're not making calls, you're giving me documents, you're giving me pay stubs, you're giving me credit card statements from 5 years back. That takes away from your life and your business and how to support your family. So settling, to me, this is what they say about mediation. If it's a good mediation, everybody leaves equally unhappy, because everybody has to give something up. And you have some control. If I walk into a courtroom with you, neither of us have any control. Your spouse has no control, and his attorney has no control. The only person that has control is judge in the black robe sitting on the bench, and they see you for about an hour and determine the fate of where your children are going to be, how much money you're going to get, and who's going to get your property. And that's not a good deal.
That sounds like a lose-lose kind of all the way around.
It is a lose-lose. It is a lose-lose.
Yeah.
So we're very much, I love my firm. I build it on the philosophy of, with change comes empowerment, because it really is. And the way you make a change is you have some control over it. And when you walk in a courtroom, nobody has control. And so we try our best to do that. But I will also tell you, if we have to go to court, we can go to court, and we don't mind doing that. And we will advocate for you. It really, we call it Southern charm with a bite, that we look out for your best interest. So, but we try really hard to settle.
Yeah. Sherry says she works with families with special needs, and so many parents end up in divorce. It's really sad. And then she says she also gets really frustrated with the foster to adopt system.
Well, I can't speak to that, and I apologize, but I do know that if you're having issues with your spouse, and then you have a special needs child that adds on to that, and then you're going through a separation and divorce, and it's only a single parent or one parent that's raising that child, the court can consider those issues, but child support's by the guidelines. It may need extra help. You may need this, you may need that, but they're going to order X amount of dollars for you.
And it's just based on a formula, right?
Right, exactly.
Regardless of the fact that the child has massive disabilities.
Well, you can ask the court to deviate from those guidelines, but then you're going to have a hearing, and then it's going to cost you $5,000-$6,000 to go do that. And there aren't a lot of people that can do that. So, after all these years, what I generally say to clients is justice is not justice at the end of the day. It really isn't. We're shuttling 20 cases through each courtroom has 20 cases, 100 cases a day, and they're just trying to move them through the system. So if you can get out of that system and work in Mediator or Arbitrator, do something differently, that's the better option.
Right. No, and I totally appreciate that. So tell us a little bit about adoption, because I know that adoption is something that's like particularly close to your heart. And Anna Yoga made the comment, the justice is not justice. Thank you. So tell us a little bit about adoption and kind of, what should we know about it in North Carolina?
I think the most important thing to know is that it's what we call statutory, that there are laws, which we call statutes, that you have to do in adoption. Mm-hmm. And both parents have to give up their parental rights. Mm-hmm. There are two people here. Mom may want to relinquish, dad may not. And then mm-hmm. we have a problem. So
right.
Both of them do. Mm-hmm. There's certain things called, termination of parental rights, where if dad hasn't been in the picture, you can the judge can judicially terminate those rights to give mm-hmm. that child an opportunity to be adopted.
Right.
But it can be a long, harrowing process and very mm-hmm. emotional process too. Yeah. But if both parents are on board and you're through a reputable agency, it can really be a blessing and a life-changing experience, not only for the birth parents, but for the adoptive parents and the child too. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, and that's important. What areas does family law specifically cover?
Let's see. I mean, we do the generic sort of thing. The divorce, people get confused. A divorce is just letting you remarry. It's a document that says, I'm no longer married to this person, and it gives me the right to marry somebody else. Doesn't have anything to do with child custody, child support, spousal support, property division, adoption, termination of parental rights. I have a lot of grandparents who are seeking custody of their grandchildren because the parents aren't able to take care of them. Mm-hmm. Wills, I do very simple wills, trust mm-hmm. and estates, those sorts of things. Unfortunately, seems to be in the air in the last few months is domestic violence protection orders. So we work a lot with folks who are going through domestic violence and that sort of thing. So those are sort of the issues that we cover.
Pretty cool. Yeah. And I think it's interesting that you said that, divorce is not the same as this whole laundry list of other things.
Right. Getting divorced is the easiest part. We are a no-fault state. If you have been separated a year and a day, you get divorced. If the other party doesn't want to, too bad. You met that time requirement, you get divorced. Literally, that is the easiest part. The hardest part is getting separated because mm-hmm. you can't make the other party leave. I was just on the phone tonight with a friend who was calling for a friend saying, well, we're going to ask them, give him an ultimatum that he has to leave tonight. And it's like, well, that's really great, but legally you can't make him leave. Mm-hmm. He has to voluntarily leave, or there has to be a judge that orders him out of the house. And a lot of people don't sort of understand that. And being separated doesn't mean sleeping in separate bedrooms. It means being in two separate households with separate roofs over your head. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, that's an important distinction.
Yes, it is.
One of the women asks, how much is the law difference among the states?
I think the property is pretty consistent throughout the states, the 50-50 and the marital property and the marital estate. We have what we call child support and custody. We have interstate jurisdiction. So those are pretty much on board all through the states. Alimony is sort of the one that's sort of out there, and states are very much different about that. Some states have, like they do child support guidelines. They have guidelines for alimony. We don't have that. It depends on what your income is and what your expenses are and what you need the other party to help you pay for. And then the other party gets to say, well, here's my income, here are my expenses, and here's what I have left over. So literally, it's to the judge's discretion. You may need $1,000, but he's got $500, and that's all you're going to get. Mm-hmm. So those are probably the most varying laws that there are in spousal support.
Sherry said that Pennsylvania does not have legal separation.
people always come and say, I want a legal separation or I need separation papers. In North Carolina, if one party leaves with the intent to be separate and apart, you're separated. You don't get a piece of paper. Nobody needs to sign anything. You are literally separated for all intents and purposes of getting a divorce.
So you don't need a paper to say that you're separated.
You don't, but what you do need a paper for is to say, who's going to get the house? How are we going to divide our retirement? What's custody going to look like? How much child support are you going to pay? Alimony are you going to pay? Those sorts of things. So if you leave, or he leaves, or she leaves,
right?
Y'all have none of that in place, and you're staying in the house, and you're an entrepreneur, and you've been a stay-at-home mom. He didn't have to pay your mortgage. He didn't have to pay you a dime, unless a court orders it, or you have a separation agreement that says he does. And so you may be out there for 3 or 4 months on your own. So a lot of women, particularly who come to me, if it's not an abusive situation and you can stay there, then we make a plan. Hoard some, whatever money you can get, open your own savings, open your own checking account, get your own credit, and let's put a plan in place of how you're going to be able to survive for about 3 months or so before I can get a court to order somebody to pay you some money, or we can come to an agreement. So those are the things about education and coming and talking and sort of saying what it is that you need to do to get to where you want to be.
Absolutely. No, and this is great advice. I think, make a decision in haste and repent at leisure.
Right. Because let's say that you get mad, you walk out of the house that night, and you say, I'm gone, we're separated. Well, surprise, you can't go back to the house. He changed the locks, call the police, and get you trespassed because you still have ownership in the home if you own the home, but you're not allowed to go back unless you get consent to do that. So back up a truck, load all your stuff in a truck, have your apartment rented or your house leased or whatever, but make a plan. Don't just walk out in haste, because it's going to take a lot of money and a lot of time to change that decision.
Right. Because, if you walk out and you leave everything behind because you're, mad or whatever, you've just left everything behind.
Right. You still own it. But if you walk out with the clothes on your back, that's all you're going to have until the other party lets you back in, or a court says you can go back in and get your stuff.
Right. And what happens if they decide to sell everything while you're gone?
Well, they can sell it, but they owe you half of whatever they sold it for.
Right. But if they sell it for $1.
Right. Well, here's what I can tell you. I can't tell you how many mediations I've been at 3:00 in the morning where we're fighting over the ceramic cat. And it's not about the ceramic cat. It may be about the emotion that's attached to that, or I just don't want the other person to have it. So here's what you need to do. If you're thinking about separating, make copies of your important papers, birth certificates, religious things, tax documents. Go snooping around, because things all of a sudden start disappearing once you separate, or you start talking about separating. Make copies, put them back. Make a plan. Go open your own savings account, get your own checking account, get your own credit. A lot of people are just signatories on their husband's or their wife's credit cards. That's not your credit. And you can't rent an apartment unless you have credit. You can't rent an apartment unless you have deposits. So if you got an extra $100 every month or every week or $5 a week, get it, put it in your own account and get that money, and then find a place to live, put a plan in place, pack your bags, back a truck up, and then at least you have a stable place to be so that you can survive the storm that's going to come next about all that.
Right. What about child custody?
I know. Then that's, it's hard, because the Constitution tells us each parent has the right to parent their child. And so let's say you separate and you drop your child off to school, and dad comes and gets the child after school. Well, dad's got your son in the house that you can't go back to. And you're not going to see your child unless dad says you can, or a court orders it. And so dad takes the child to school, then you rush to get there before the bell rings, and you get the child. And now we've got a child who's in the middle of adult stuff that they shouldn't be in the middle of. And a lot of times parents use their children as leverage or they know that that's how they can hurt the other person.
Mhm.
And that to me, property is property. We can always get you some money and you're going to be okay. But when you start putting your kids in the middle of stuff, then we have a problem. And unfortunately, that's why if you're thinking about separating and you can still talk to the other party, then let's talk and just sort of propose some things. Because in Wake County, my Wake County judges start with the premise of joint custody. Unless there's something really bad going on, both parents need to see their children and they need to have a relationship with them. And so you may be mad at your partner and he may not have treated you well, or you just want to get out. You got to separate that out from what's best for your children.
Right. Even with a domestic violence order.
Right. Unless you can find it. And this is what it's hard, but unless, the child has seen it or the child has been involved in it, it's hard to make a nexus to that child. And so if he's a great dad, doesn't hurt the child. Y'all don't need to be together. There's going to be an order put in place where you don't see each other, but the judge is going to put some visitation provisions in that domestic violence protective order, more than likely.
Yeah. No, and I think that it's a good point to make that because, I have friends who think that, if I have a domestic violence restraining order, then he doesn't get to see the kids.
Rarely. For that first 10 days, when you go get a domestic violence protective order, probably there's a 10-day return hearing. So for those 10 days, he probably won't. But then you're going to have a hearing in front of a judge, and the judge is unless there's some abuse of the child or CPS is involved, Child Protective Services, he's going to have some visitation. And people come to me all the time, I want sole custody. And my answer to them is, for the most part, you're not going to get that. And a lot of people don't want to hear it, but I'm very upfront and I'm very honest. And I'm going to tell you more than likely what's going to happen. And both parents are going to see these children and they're going to have an opportunity to raise these children. And just because you two don't get along, your children love you and they need to be and have a relationship with both of you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that it's important to know that. What about the concept of kidnapping your own child? I know we talked about this briefly last time.
We did. For the most part, you can't kidnap your own child. If there's no court order in place about who has the child when, if there's an agreement in place about who has the child when, you're their parent. And you have a right under the Constitution to have your child. And so it's not kidnapping per se. You can get an emergency custody order to order that the parent return the child. But as far as kidnapping goes, it's not a kidnapping issue.
Right. So
now,
if you...
Step parent is different, but if you're the biological parent of that child and there's no court order in place or anything that prohibits you from having that child, then it's not kidnapping if you take them.
You're right. No, and I think that it's important to understand that because, I think a lot of people think that, if we have an agreement in place, you were very clear on this last time. If you have an agreement in place between each other, that's not a custody order.
Well, it's not an order. And that's the difference. It is a custody agreement. It's a contract. It's like if I buy a car and I don't pay my car payment, my relief is to file a complaint and ask for a breach of contract. No police officer is going to take your separation agreement and order you to give back your child, because they can only order something if there is something signed by a judge that is a court order. So that's the difference. That y'all may have an agreement, but police officer more than likely is not going to go get your child at that point.
Yep. Yeah, no, and I think that it's just important to kind of repeat some of those points because I don't know that a lot of the people here watching at this time, were watching last time, and we have quite a few people actually watching right now, but they're not typing in questions. So I'm trying to think about what questions they might have and what questions I might have in that kind of a situation, which is why I'm kind of trying to run through.
I think what's important is especially if you're thinking about separating or you are separated, the first thing I tell folks to do is your children best. I can tell you generically what some custody schedules are, but my husband, ex and I separated when my child was 2. And so we had a schedule then, and it's changed and changed, but he's a very easy transition kid. He was not one of those, and I was embarrassed when you go to the daycare and they're all clinging to your legs. Mine never did that. He just went, bye, see ya, and so he was good with transitions. And so we could be away from each other 2 or 3 days, and that was good. Your children or child may not be like that. So you have to really sit back and be thoughtful about what works best for my child. I can give you all sorts of 5-2-2, week on, week off, every other weekend, and sort of brainstorm those sorts of things. But I think the most important thing, if you have children and you're separating, that's where most of your thought needs to go to. The rest of it is sort of formula. We can do a formula. We can see how much money you need. Here's how the property is going to be divided. But the custody is a crapshoot, and it's based on what your family and your traditions and what you believe your child would be best able to do.
Yeah. And so at what age do kids get to decide which parent they're with, or custodial, or?
They never get to decide. A judge always gets to decide. The case law says a child can, talk to a judge or testify when they're of suitable age and discretion. And, what does that mean? And a lot of times what happens in court, a lot of our judges don't even want to talk to kids. And if they do, they'll talk to them in chambers. But you need to think long and hard about putting your child on the stand and having them testify in open court about what they want. Because you don't know if one parent has coached them, has talked to them, is influencing them. And they shouldn't be a part of that anyway, at all. But sometimes it's necessary, and I understand that. But there's no certain age, but certainly a 5-year-old is not going to. 12, 13, 14, perhaps a judge can listen to them, but just because they say, I want to do this or I want to do that, at the end of the day, it's still the judge's decision about where they're going to go.
No, and that's also important. So what about, we've talked about child support. What about paying for college?
Unless you two agree to it outside of court, once your child turns 18, the court has no jurisdiction to order you to do anything. Unless if they turn 18 and they're still in high school, you're still on the hook for child support. But college expenses and those sorts of things, judge can't order it because they don't have jurisdiction. Because once you turn 18, you're an adult and you're not a child anymore. So it's not a child custody issue or a child support issue.
So even if your kid thought that they were going to college all along and that mom and dad were going to pay for it,
the judge would say, that's really nice of you, but I can't force you to do it. But certainly people put that in separation agreements. I've had people put in wedding expenses, and those, whatever the two people agree to in a separation agreement, if the court wouldn't order it, but y'all agree to it and it's not against public policy, have at it. Again, you two know what's best for your family. And the judge would assume that, but they can't. But there's some things that they cannot order and don't have jurisdiction over.
So what are some other things that the judge cannot order that people try to get all the time, or that you see on a regular or even not so regular basis, but are like, that it's like, oh yeah, I've seen this a few times.
I think what you raised was the college expenses, wedding expenses, or this is what people have to remember is the case law says when you separate and you have spousal support or child support, that you get to live as you did the last few years of your marriage. That's great in fantasy. It's sort of like a Disney movie, but two households can't live as one. So if you've been a stay-at-home mom and you're used to going out and spending and doing this, and your kids are going to expensive camps and doing all these extracurriculars, you're not going to have the funds to do that anymore. And although the judge may say that would be in their best interest, and that's what they've done, if there's no money to do that, they can't order that sort of thing.
Right.
So it's really more about what the lifestyle was before, and really wrapping your head around, I can't do that anymore.
Right. Because you just
at this moment now
effectively, cut, your income
in half.
And in half, you're trying to support two households on
one income
or one set of income.
So yeah, and it's hard, especially if you have sort of older children that have grown up in a house, and so here's my stability. Here's what I know. my mom and dad are separating. My world is turned upside down. And a lot of times the primary custodial parent, for all good reasons, wants to stay in the home, but you may not be able to afford that.
Mhm.
And so those are some issues those are hard issues, but they're reality, and that's how it works, unfortunately.
So you just brought up an interesting question, with a home. How does that work?
Well,
one person stays in it, and then what?
One person stays in it, and if one person wants to stay in it, and there's like equity in the house, which is, here's what my mortgage is, here's what my house is worth. And so let's say there's $100,000 worth of equity in there. Well, the person who's leaving gets $50,000 of that. So if you want to stay, you've got to refinance the mortgage in your name and find $1,000 somewhere to pay them out.
Right.
Or the court would order it to be sold. If neither one of you can afford to do that, you sell it and split the proceeds. And somebody can stay in there while it's being sold and, all of that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, if there are two people on the mortgage or your husband's on the mortgage and you're in house, you've got to get him off that mortgage. And if you can't afford to do that, you got to sell the house.
Right. Well, and I think that's a good point because, even like if there's, you're trying to sell the house, who's paying the mortgage while one of you is still sitting in the house?
Well, hopefully y'all can come to an agreement of that, but the court's going to order somebody to pay the mortgage. And that could be your...
Can you please take Allie with you?
You think I'm more outside? I was just gonna.
No, you can have her sit upstairs with you or something.
I was just gonna change my laundry.
Okay.
So if somebody's staying in the house and you're the dependent spouse, the court can order your alimony to be he pays the mortgage, or order your child support to be he pays the mortgage, sort of thing. So somebody's got to pay the mortgage.
Right.
And if you can't, then immediately it needs to be placed on the market. But there can be provisions put in place for that sort of thing. Because a lot of times the house is the biggest asset that people have. So you don't want to see that go into foreclosure or lose that. So the court will go out of its way to make sure that doesn't happen in some way.
Good. Yeah, no. And I think it's important to kind of ask some of these questions because I think people have this idea that a lot of misconceptions in their head about what is and is not involved here.
Right.
What are some misconceptions that you see people have that they walk into your office with that you're like, it really doesn't work that way? I'm so sorry.
Well, I think the biggest one is I'm going to ask him to, I want him to leave. I'm going to ask him to leave or her to leave. You can't do that. Or we're separated. We're living, I've been living upstairs. He's been in the basement. You're not separated. This is my lifestyle and I expect him to pay and do what he's been doing. It doesn't work that way. I mean, it's just it's a harsh reality, but it doesn't mean that it really, I can't use the word I want to say. It's really crappy when you're going through it. But I've been doing this a long time, like 17 years. And I have never had one person who came to me that did not come out the other side better. Stronger, more confident, really after a few years in a better financial position a lot of time. So going through it,
it's not easy.
I equate it to a death. It's like a death because it is. It's the death of your future, your dreams, everything you thought was going to be is gone. And so you've got to work through those stages, and you've got to work through those stages and also work through perhaps going to court, working through separation, doing all these other things. So you got a lot going on. So it's going to be 2 or 3 years down the road, but you'll find your equilibrium. It will come back and you will be a stronger person.
Right.
For that, and just the harsh realities of it are when you come and talk to Sarah Hinks, our other attorney in the office, you come talk to us, we don't sugarcoat it. We're going to tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly so that you're prepared and you know what's going to happen. We're not going to say everything's going to be all right because for the moment it's not.
Right. How often do people who get divorced end up in bankruptcy?
A lot of it used to be, we were going through the recession. It was almost every person who walked through the door. It's gotten much better, and it's I can't even remember the last time I've had somebody in bankruptcy. But if you're in bankruptcy, everything has sort of stayed down in my world in family court about property until that gets settled.
Mhm.
And it's really bad because you were a stay-at-home mom, you took care of the kids, but we don't have any money anymore. There's no money to divide. There's no property to divide. And at that point, there's not a whole lot of relief that the court can do for you because they can't order somebody to pay money that they don't have.
Mhm.
So here's my advice to folks. Know what your finances are. Know whether y'all have separate bank accounts or not. Know what the income is. Know what the bills, know what your monthly expenses are. If you have separate accounts, make it so that y'all can see them. So you're not blindsided when somebody says, oh, I make $100,000 when actually I make 50, or we have no credit card debt. And all of a sudden you're separating and here's $50,000 worth of credit card debt, you know?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. If somebody has credit card debt in their name, how does that get split?
If it was used for a marital purpose, I mean, not whining and dining your paramour or your girlfriend, then it's a marital debt. Even if you didn't know about it, if they were using it to pay the mortgage or doing this and that, then the court's going to portion some portion of that to the other spouse. Just because it doesn't matter whose name it's in North Carolina, it matters when you acquired it. So if that debt was acquired during the marriage, even if it was in the other party's name, it's still a marital debt, which is kind of, you know, terribly unfair, it sounds like, but that's just the way it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds like it could be really ugly.
Right. And when folks come and see us on initial consultation, it takes about an hour and a half. And a lot of people, when I say, okay, you know, what are your debts? We go through each debt and what are your assets. A lot of people don't know. How much is your mortgage? I don't know. Are you on the deed to the house? I don't know. How are your cars titled? I don't know. You know, these are all questions, whether you're getting separated or not, that if you're in a partnership in a marriage, that you have a right and you should ask about.
So if you have multiple cars and they're all in one person's name, how does that work out?
They're all a marital asset. Literally, we take an Excel spreadsheet. Here are all the assets. Here are all the debts. Assets less debts equal your marital estate, divided in half. So you can keep all three cars, but if all three cars are valued at $10,000, then the other party owes you $5,000. So you just can sort of manipulate how that 50% is distributed.
Right, of course.
Right. So you don't have to cut everything right down the middle, but
you don't have to take a chainsaw to the car.
Exactly.
Whoop.
I've seen it done before.
Oh boy. Yeah. So what is the absolute oh my God, worst thing you've seen people do that you're like, oh my God, I can't believe they did that?
You know, with the property stuff, it doesn't even bother me anymore. When I see them put their children in the middle, when they talk to their children about the litigation or what's going on, it sort of floors me. And I understand that the pain that they're in, but that is the most distressing thing, I think, to all of us that do family law, is when, you know, the small people who are in the family who have no say-so are put in the middle. That has lifelong, property. I can go buy some stuff. I can go make more money. I can do this. But you damage your kids in this way just to get back at somebody else. You can't ever change that, or it's really hard to change.
Yeah.
So I think that's the most devastating thing I see every day.
Right. So have you ever seen a kind of a War of the Roses, divide the house down the middle with tape and do all that kind of thing?
I have not, because quite frankly, I don't take those cases. Life's too short. And there are a lot of attorneys that can make a lot of money off of that, but that's not what I'm in it for. I'm into it to make people's lives better, to make their families better. And so there are a lot of cases. We don't take every case that comes through the door. We're very, our word is thoughtful, and we have a sort of atmosphere and environment that we try to put forward. And if that's what you want in a scorched earth policy, I got 10 attorneys I can refer you to, but we're not one of them.
Yeah. Well, and it's important to know, I think, understand what you're asking for when you start talking about, I want to scorch the earth.
That means whatever it takes, I want to hurt them as badly as I feel they've hurt me. No matter what it takes, no matter who it hurts, no matter how much money it costs. That's a scorched earth policy.
Right. And how much does that end up costing?
In that realm, $100,000, $200,000, $300,000. You know, even the cases that we take we have contentious cases, but if you go to court and you're in court for a day or two, that's $20,000, $30,000. So anything you can do to avoid that, we'd love to help you do it, because that's money in your pocket and money you can do to support your children.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. It's just, exactly. I mean, but I wanted to have those numbers out there so people would understand, I want to do whatever it takes, darn it. Okay. Are you ready to cough up $300,000 for it?
Well, and also, are you ready to cough up the emotional toll that it's going to take on you and your family? It's not just about the money.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So some people will, and more power to. I mean, that's their choice.
Mm-hmm. So how do you handle, cases where, you take a client and you're dealing with an attorney who is a scorched earth kind of attorney?
Kind of funny. I always ask, who's your husband's attorney? And that can tell you a lot about what the cost of the case is going to be and how contentious it's going to be. I mean, you just have to deal with it at that point.
Right.
And that means a lot of times letting the court decide, because that's the less expensive, less toll on your body and your emotions. It's just go and get it over with, And a lot of times people just need to say, like, it's not, what's going to happen at the end of the day, at the end of the court case. A lot of times we can all predict. But sometimes it's therapeutic and cathartic for folks to tell their story. And once they do that, it sort of takes it all away and washes it away, and they can move forward. So you just sort of have to figure out who those people are and if that's the best thing for them.
Right. So what is the longest divorce case you've ever had to deal with?
Well, let's see. I've got my 2010 case. I've got, because I've got one from 2008 that popped back up because kids age, people get new jobs and they don't need alimony anymore. So it's not just the beginning of it, but orders can be modified. People retire. You got to do stuff about that. So it's not necessarily if they're a long case and it's bad, but if you're doing custody, child support, property, spousal support in Wake County, it can take a year or two to wind through the system just to get that first set of orders, and then if you've got small kids, custody can go on till they're 18 and child support can go on till they're 18. So it can be a long drawn out process.
I think that's important to think about that you're going to be, regardless of whether you want to or not, and what all your friends are telling you, you're going to be dealing with that opposing party until your children are 18 at a minimum.
Till they're grown.
And beyond, right?
Right. You got graduations, you've got grandbabies, you've got weddings, all of that, to look forward to or not. So at some point, y'all got to figure out a way to work through it. And some people can, and some people can't.
Right. Well, I think it's just worth, when you're pissed and you're mad, think about, we had a kid together.
Right. And I think a lot of times that's what we're, they call us attorneys and counselors at law. And a lot of times the counselor part comes in about having those discussions with clients that they're so mad and they're so ticked off and I want to do this and I want to do that. And then you sort of bring them off the ledge, as we call it, and you talk to them about, let's talk about what happens in 10 years, let's look to the future. And because a lot of times a lot of people separate and they're really not contentious. They wanted to spend holidays together and we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And I always tell them, there might be a time when you might want to meet somebody or you get remarried, and do you really want to be spending Christmas? with your ex. So it's a long-term sort of look out into the future process that we believe our biggest job and our most important job is to help them look forward. And so when you're making decisions today, make sure you're making decisions that will work for you in the future too.
Absolutely. So you come from an interesting educational background.
Yes, I do.
Would you care to share that?
Well, it comes in really handy. You know, I have a bachelor's degree in social work and I have a master's in social work. I worked for nonprofits and did lobbying and went to law school and fell in love with family law, and I never looked back. And I think that the skills I learned in undergrad and grad school served me well, because you can look at the elements of a case and the facts of a case, but you have to remember there are actual people involved. And I think that's what helps me most in that way.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think that's really cool.
I do too.
It's kind of a cool background, you know, just like, yeah, you know, you realize, you know, not every attorney comes with the same background.
Right. And there are a lot of schools. I think, I know Hawaii has one, and there are a couple of other states that have dual degrees for master's in social work and a law degree, which, you know, they just go hand in hand.
You're kind of like, that doesn't sound right. But yeah, in some ways, I think it does.
I know. It's great.
Yeah. Cool. So, you know, if you could leave people with a couple of thoughts, what would they be?
I think the couple of thoughts would be, you will get through this. I promise. That you have to work through those stages of grief. And you think that when you get through one, you'll take a step forward and you'll take 10 back, but you'll get through it. You didn't get this far to fail, you know, especially if you have kids. I don't mean this to sound crude, but you know, you laid down together, you made these kids, y'all are intertwined together. You love this person at some point in your life. And if you can sort of dig deep and remember why you loved them and how that all came about, I think that goes an immeasurable amount to get you through the separation and divorce so you can move forward. It really is all about moving forward, because you can't stay where you are and you can't go back. So the only way you got to go is forward. So let's make the best of it. And it can be, I just think it can be exciting and a new life and a new start. So I think if people can sort of wrap their head around that and their pain and get through that, it'll be okay. It will be okay.
That's cool. So if somebody is in imminent danger, what should they do?
One, call 911. That's the best thing to do, or get out. Because the domestic violence protective orders can be, you know, police can come if they see that there's domestic violence. They will immediately either take someone and take them downtown, or they'll order them out of the house. But sometimes it's a tricky situation where they don't see anything, or both parties, or somebody's scared and says, oh, nothing happened. And so I would say call 911 or call Interact, which is the domestic violence protection sort of shelter, and they have counselors and you can get your protective order there. But get out and get safe is the best thing that you can do. Right.
So if somebody thinks that they are at risk of their spouse or partner, you know, threatening their life, like, you know, becoming murderous, etc., what are the steps somebody should take to make sure that they are protected to the best of their ability? You know, if in that kind of a situation where you're like, okay, now what do I do?
What if you can, if they're, you know, there's a way that you can, they're at work and you can go grab your stuff and have a plan and get to Interact. I mean, get to a shelter, get to a friend, call 911 immediately. You can get a protective, we call it domestic violence protective order, or 50B. Go to the magistrate at the Wake County Sheriff's Department. They're open 24 hours a day. We have a domestic violence protective court on the 5th floor at the courthouse in downtown Raleigh that can help you do that. But you have to also remember it's a piece of paper. And it can protect you, and it says that they can't come near you, they can't have guns, they can't do this. But again, it's a piece of paper. So the best thing I can tell someone is call, if you're in that situation, call 911. Get out.
Right. And what about the kids in that kind of a situation?
Grab them. I've had some people, I think I had someone tell me last week that they called, had a baby, had 2 kids. She wanted to leave. Officer said, you can leave, but the kids are staying here. Police officers, and they're fabulous, and they, what would we do without them? But a lot of times they don't want to get involved in domestic stuff.
Yeah.
So,
well, because domestic stuff is some of the riskiest stuff to get involved in.
Right. And it's chaotic. So if that person, if you're home and they go to work, get your kids, pack your bag somewhere, keep it in a closet, put your birth certificates or social security cards, get some cash, have it all packed up in a place where you can get it and grab it and go. And you can go to Interact, which is on Overland Road. I know that Fuquay Arena has one. Johnson County has a shelter. But if you're in that situation, go talk to your friends, go talk to your pastor, go talk to somebody and make a plan and get out. And then once you get out, then we can help you get some orders and things in place so that you have some stability. But it's not going to happen immediately. So have a plan is the best I can say to folks.
No, and I think it's important to take that pragmatic approach because I have had friends that have had to get out.
Right.
With children. And, that's exactly it. Have a plan, know where you're going.
Right. Right. Have your car full of gas. Make sure you got your license, got an extra set of keys, all of those two things.
Right.
Right.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time.
You
I know it's like incredibly late for you.
I know. I get up at 5, so this is my bedtime.
Oh, this is beyond your bedtime. Yes.
But thank you so much. We really do say that
you.
education is power, and anytime we can talk, and even if it's 2 people, 1 person, whatever listening, if it makes a difference and they can share that, we are happy to do that. And I hope the folks will call if they have questions or set an appointment to come and see us. We would love, to share the education and spread the good word, as we call it.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that, I've put your URL to your website there.
Oh, thank you.
And I put the interact information
Good.
there as well. So that's awesome. And I want to tell you, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Haley. I appreciate it.
And we're going to tell all the Facebook friends, bye.
Bye.